Action.
If I can say one more thing before we go into the topic about the high heels.
Hmm.
You know that I discovered Converse when I was 36 or 37 years old.
What do you mean Converse?
Converse, the brand of sneakers,
Okay.
right?
It's
And I was like, what is this? It was so comfortable.
you didn't know
Like
that there are
wearing,
flats.
if you wear high heels for like at least a decade every day, and then you put Converse on, and this is really not supposed to be a paid advertisement, but I was like, man, it's just like, walking on the cloud suddenly. And I was like really used to having all those high heels in my previous job in line. So like I just switched them depending
Wow.
on need and color of my outfit. And this was a revolution.
Feet
Okay.
revolution.
Converse support this podcast.
Converse support this podcast. Um, okay. And welcome back to Fractured, a podcast by Refocus Media Lab citizen journalists, where we cover every possible topic related to the so called refugee crisis. Today, we're in Greece again, together with my co host Rashid Galim and our wonderful guest, Kayra Martinez. Welcome to our show. Kayra is a founder of Love Without Borders, an NGO that works here in Greece and does amazing things. So we know Love Without Borders from their work in art, but they do so much more. And we will start with those other things that they are doing in Greece, and then we will move towards the art part. Our topic today is refugee crisis in terms of housing. What is happening? What is going on here in Greece? We know that it's extremely problematic for refugees to get any proper housing. We know the conditions in camps are absolutely terrifying. I would like to ask you first, how did you come around this topic of housing, of those problems with accommodation for refugees? How did it happen? You're American. You're now fully based in Greece. The beginning of the story.
Thank you both for welcoming me to be here today and share and discuss this very important issue that's, I feel, sometimes being swept under the rug, as we say in English. I am American and I was living in Germany in 2015 when the refugee crisis started. And I started to work in other countries, Hungary, Serbia. And when I arrived in Greece, I realized that this would be the place for me to start working a little bit more in depth. And volunteering in a refugee camp, 2016, Nea Kavala in northern Greece near Saloniki, was my first view of the horrible conditions that the refugees were meant to live in. They stood in line for 2 hours to get a croissant and a box of orange juice. They were living in dilapidated tents, and they didn't have any food or money to feed their children. How am I going to help with this? I have no background in anything I'm doing. I just showed up one day and I have 4,000 people to take care of in a camp. I was always reaching out to the bigger organizations because I had always thought that that's where the support would come through. However, after several meetings with families with very vulnerable cases, I realized that they weren't going to come through for us. So I started to problem solve one by one. I spent 18 hours in the refugee camp going from tent to tent. Because I didn't have a background in this work, I listened. If I take one thing from the work that I've done in the last 9 years, this is the biggest tool. This is the biggest thing that I've ever learned, is just to listen. The people had gone through horrible situations, leaving their countries, losing children along the way. I mean, I have stories, amazing stories and dreadful stories of what the people went through. So I had to decide how I was going to help. And I found straight away that housing was one of them, because we had a lot of people in very vulnerable situations, medical situations, women with lots of children, and people that just need extra care. And how I was going to do that was the question of the day. One day I woke up and I had always dozens of messages from people, because my work was on social media. I was trying to update people and let them know about the people that were being sent to these refugee camps. I wanted to create more awareness about this problem. And so many people were writing me. They were asking me what they could do. Could they send clothes? How they could help. One woman from Colorado, I didn't know her at all. And she said, "Can you just tell me what is the biggest problem? And what is the biggest concern of yours?" And I said, housing. This was almost 9 years ago when I first started. So I knew straight away that that was the biggest issue that we were going to face.
Hmm.
And that's how I started to create projects and programs in order to house refugees.
In 2018, 2017, I was working in Iliona's camp with an NGO called Elix. And at some point, the Greek government started to give notifications. I mean, I don't know, paper. You have to evict the camps and go. So the first wave, they left and they took them to this like faraway camp. And then they told the people there. And then so the second wave didn't want to go. The police came, a lot of problems. And then they were like 80% of the camp should leave, and just 20% they were waiting for their papers to get them, and then they would want to kick them out again. But these people didn't like it in those faraway camps. Can you explain to us why those camps are not suitable for these people?
So, regardless of where you're coming from, regardless of anything, human beings should not be living in refugee camps. I think that the conditions are deplorable. The children are waking up in the morning and seeing barbed wire all around them. They're growing up in not refugee camps, but prisons. So, regardless of your background, nobody should be growing up in this environment.
You know, there's this assumption that because people wait so long for their asylum decision, that when they finally get it, this is the happiest moment, right? It's so amazing. Finally, papers come. I will get my freedom. I get to do so many things. And of course, then they wait very long for their documents, for their ID, for their passport. But also, it cuts the support immediately. Could you tell us a little bit more what is happening at this moment when people get asylum, when they live in a camp? What is happening with the decision?
Unfortunately, it should be a day to celebrate for them, because they've waited, some of them, for many years to get their asylum. However, once they get their asylum, they're kicked out of the refugee camp. They are literally thrown out and they don't have a place to stay. Our organization is taking on many of those cases. They're writing me from Leros and Samos and other islands and telling us that they have to leave the refugee camp, and where do they go? So we have been working since 2016 trying to find places for these particular cases.
Mhm. Some of the people get housing outside the camps. Those are the lucky ones. We had a case, several cases actually, of minors, so-called unaccompanied minors, who came here without parents, and they were put in those minors' shelters, which in general are nicer, of course, than camps, yet still have some issues. And I remember when one of the boys was about to turn 18, so this like happy moment, 18, I'm a grown up and so on. But 18 means that you are also kicked out of this shelter. And he got to stay a week longer because he was waiting for his ID, but that was it. this one extra week, and then he had to leave. And nobody's asking questions, where are you going to go? What are you going to do with your life? Do you have any relative, any friends to go to? And this is something that is really, really disturbing, because those are very young people we're talking about, who came here without parents, without any supervision. They don't have those role models around them, and they end up on the street. I don't know if you are aware, but there still is actually a huge prostitution problem around Omonia of very young boys, which is extremely sad. Uh, Probably a topic for a whole new episode. But what I would like to ask you, people do not only get accommodation in camps or those shelters for minors. If they are vulnerable, they can be placed by the government, or predominantly, I think, by UNHCR, in some kind of a housing, usually a shared housing. How vulnerable do they have to be to actually be housed in those nicer places?
So the vulnerability consists of several things, usually unaccompanied minors. This is something that Love Without Borders is not allowed to support, obviously. Medical issues, women with small children, or people with psychological issues. Those are some of the reasons why people are put into houses and placed into houses. The vulnerability requirements are pretty much the same across the board for many of the organizations that are supporting with housing.
Sonia mentioned about when you get your paper, and you said it's a happy day, but they will kick you out and stop the financial aid. And I'm just trying to like understand the reason behind it. What is the reason? Like why the government are doing this? I mean, in other countries, when you get your paper and maybe they will tell you to leave, they already prepared you for this. You already learned the language. In Germany, you have to learn the language in order to get the financial aid, and then you go into program to find jobs. Here, there is none of this. If there were no NGOs providing kids with Greek lessons, the government will not do it.
I wish I had an answer to that question, because it seems that in order to run a proper integration program, you also have to place people after the language and the skills into jobs. And there's a big missing component here, I feel, for many refugees, because they're not prepared for the workforce at all.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, what we're seeing is once people get their asylum, some of them want to stay, but they don't have any way to work, any way to fund themselves here. So the next step and their next alternative is to buy tickets out of Greece and try to apply for asylum somewhere else. And unfortunately, we've seen many, many people do that. And if you get the number of the cases going to Germany from Greece, those numbers are exponential. They are getting so many cases now. And because there was a court tribunal in 3 Bundesstaaten in Germany that they took these cases to court, and they found that Greece is not a safe country for refugees. They won that. So now when people go to Germany and they apply for asylum, they're not sending them back on the Dublin 3 law.
Hmm.
So what your organization do is find houses for people and put them there and help them. Did you face any experience with like racism when finding houses for these people? Because it's difficult here, even for us refugees, to call someone a Greek and say, "I want to rent this house." They will be more skeptic. They will ask more questions. And a friend of mine actually saw this sign outside the building says, "No apartments for Pakistanis and Africans." And I remember like the old days in the United States when they used to write it on restaurants, no dogs or blacks. So, have you experienced anything like
Oh, absolutely. I've been housing refugees since 2016, and we've seen it all. We've seen real estate brokers taking money from us. We've seen um, them kicking out women with newborns because they were African. So, what we're trying to do is to be very upfront and open to the landlords. The landlords from Greece that are working with us were very direct. This is for a refugee. You're either going to allow us to rent your apartment or you're not. We have a 1-year contract that's signed by Love Without Borders stating that we will support this particular family or this particular woman with her children. We will pay the rent and the bills for 1 year as long as they also keep up their part of the contract and respect the people living inside of the apartment. And so far we have found some, but it's very challenging, I must say. My colleague who runs our project, he's from Syria, and when he calls and says it's for a family from Syria or for a family from Congo, click.
You know, one of our students from Lesbos, they were transferred from Lesbos to Athens, and UNHCR found them housing because it was a mom and 5 children. So they went straight to this house, and they were welcomed by the neighbors, blocking the entrance, saying, "No, no refugee families, no refugee people in this
Mhm.
building." It was, as she said, it was extremely humiliating for them because UNHCR had to come negotiate with the people to let them in, presenting them as the good people, right? She said, like, when it would never be a case if the color of their skin or their passport would be different than that. She said it was not about, yes, that we finally got into the building, it was about the humiliation that we had to go through.
Also, Athens was had a lot of squads before that, and but the police closed them. And these squads were run by mostly volunteers, and they housed a lot of people, a lot of families. That was refugee to them. And but I don't know. Since this government came to power, they just closed all of them. And I think the only one that's I think it's Notara, the only one. I don't know how it's still standing. So what did happen to those people? Where did they go? And why the government did this?
So squats are illegal, and it was the right of the government to close it down, but they didn't really need to do it that way because they went at 5 o'clock in the morning with guns, and it was really traumatic for the people. We were in contact with many people, and they took everybody out. Everybody went to Syntagma Center, and they were waiting, and they got sent with buses to refugee camps. It was horrific to see what they went through, and that was the beginning of more people being separated into different camps, but always outside of Athens. So they didn't want any refugee camps, as you mentioned, Ilionis. That was the last one that was closed down. So they want the refugees outside of the city, isolated.
It's always like this, out of sight, out of mind. You don't see it. And yes, squats are illegal in this country, yet they're happening all over Exarchia, especially the neighborhood. But if you've ever been inside one of those buildings, you see that they're actually doing a good job. They take care of those basic needs. They do not aspire to do anything that is not in their area. So they take care of children, organize some kind of extra activities, but they would never try to provide formal education, right? This should not be their area. And I remember that they are usually governed by refugees themselves. So it's, yes, there are lots of volunteers in those places, but it's also, this is your place. Like, do it somehow, manage it on your own, right? This is for you. Rashid started the conversation about how you guys, as Love Without Borders, try to help with housing. But I would like you to tell us a little bit more. How did you start? What are you doing right now?
So in 2016 was after I received that message that I mentioned. It was the first time that we decided to create a campaign. So what we did is we had a 3-page form, and I had to choose the families based on vulnerability. I believe there were 4,000 people in the camp at the time. And basically, We filled out the form with the translator. The majority of the people at the time were from Syria. And within the very first month, we put campaigns live on social media. We needed to have them 70% funded before we moved the families.
Mhm.
Mm.
Obviously, there was not Palestine and Ukraine and everything else back then. So the funding was instantaneous. We were able to create funding and cover 38 campaigns, which meant I moved 38 families out of the refugee camp in 1 month.
That's
Wow.
really
So,
something within
yes.
1 month.
So our idea was move everybody from Nea Kavala because it's a small village, move them with a bus. We documented their bus tickets, them leaving in the bus to Athens, and then we had 2 volunteers that picked them up and took them to their new house. They received a key and a food stipend for the month. So it was really a great way to give them their independence. They could go buy the food they wanted, they could cook for themselves. They were meant to make all of the decisions for their own family during that 1 year or 8 months. And we had a huge success rate. And we were also very lucky because after that 8 months or so was covered, the majority of those families were called for relocation or family reunification. And so it worked out pretty well that they were able to move after that. And then when I moved to Athens in 2018, the need was bigger and badder than ever. And I realized that this would be always at the forefront of our organization. So in the beginning, I just had 4 families, but every year the numbers have grown exponentially. Last year, we had a huge house with 25 refugees from the Middle East and Africa. We had programs, we had 4 levels, and every level was filled with families. Men were supported, single men were supported, women were supported, families were supported. And it was a really wonderful project. We had groups from all around the world helping us renovate, helping us teach English, cooking together. And it was really a global feat to get everybody together and to support those families. Parallel to that, we had rented 11 apartments. Our team is very small. We had 2 people at the time, Ahmed from Syria and myself. And so this year, because of the sponsorships that have gone down, and also for our own, um, you know, mental health, we had to slow down and take less families on. But right now, we're probably running around 5 to 6 families, looking at a couple more because we have a long list. Every month, we receive many referrals from the IOM, from the Red Cross, from numerous grassroots organizations that also need help with housing. It's one of the biggest needs, in my opinion. And unfortunately, the emails that I've sent out to the European Commission to ask for some acknowledgement about the situation have not been received or not been answered. I went several years ago to the European Union in Belgium and I voiced my concerns. Nothing was done. Now nothing is done. And I just feel like also I'm working on this now 9 years. So I'm trying to think outside of the box because this program is actually funded by the European Union. The funds are there for every family to have a house. Nobody should really be in a refugee camp.
Yes, we will get into how the housing here in Greece is funded, the governmental side. But I just wanted to ask you, you mentioned that you get referrals from different organizations. Is this the main way how people learn about you, or can they just contact you directly if they are in need of housing? And then how do you choose the ones who are the most in need of housing?
We have a referral form, which is not out there so much because it's very challenging if you receive one every day, and I don't want people to be waiting for answers. I don't want to do that to people, knowing that our housing is slower than it used to be. So actually, my number has been shared within the refugee community since 2016. Some people say, call her, she's a lawyer, call her, she's medical support. But it's only because I do a lot of referrals. I know who to send them to. I know who's going to be able to help them. And even if they do write me, it's important that we answer every message and even say, I apologize, I cannot help, but perhaps check this organization. Many people are sitting in a refugee camp. Their voices are not being heard. And that will lead us to how we are using art as a way and platform to help the refugees as well.
And we will learn about it much more in the second part of our episodes. So we will invite you for a short break right now, during which you will have an opportunity to see a short clip from Love Without Borders, and you will see not only how they tackle the housing issue, but also how they provide art to people.
Love Without Borders for Refugees in Need is a U.S. and Greek-registered nonprofit that seeks to help refugees in Greece regain stability and autonomy over their lives. Using art as a means for self-expression and a tool for economic independence, their work strives to give refugees a platform through which to express themselves, share their experiences, and forge relationships with both a local and a global community.
My name is Kayra Martinez. I'm the director of Love Without Borders for Refugees in Need. I started in 2015 volunteering in Frankfurt, Germany, where I was based as a flight attendant, and my humanitarian work took me to Greece, and I started to volunteer in refugee camps all over Greece on the islands and the mainland.
Since 2017, Love Without Borders has hosted over 115 art shows all around the world. These shows have helped to generate revenue that goes directly back to the artists. It gives refugees a platform to share their stories and experiences, and it helps to generate empathy by educating the public about the plight of refugees.
I hope when the people see my painting, they will understand what is our problem. We have many problems in Africa. Many people died, many people doesn't the food, the place who can live. We have many problems, but with my painting I can share our problems, and I hope they will understand our problem.
Unless you're over in Greece and you can see firsthand the situation, it's very hard to comprehend how devastating this refugee crisis is.
These initiatives have tremendous value to the refugee population, but of course, simply the act of making art together does incredible good for these children as well.
My name is Fatima, and this is my friend.
Hi, my name is Zainab and I'm from Afghanistan.
Me too.
I like when all the people see my picture. I'm so happy.
I'm Ali and I'm 12 years old. I'm from Afghanistan, city Kabul, capital city. And today I come, Kayra invite us to paint, and I paint a house near a lake. And I'm happy here, relax. It makes me feel good.
These paintings are a powerful medium that allow refugees to share their stories and worldviews with others. Art in this way is an incredibly powerful tool for communication and for education.
Art has always been our main focus at Love Without Borders because it has been the best way to connect the community in Greece as well as the communities abroad. When the artist receives that photo of his art up on a wall in America or with somebody that has valued his art and his story, I think that's really, really special.
Over half of the world's refugees are children who are spending their entire childhoods away from home, often separated from their families. Though they may have witnessed or experienced violence, loss, and tremendous hardship, art can provide a sense of normalcy, an opportunity to play, and an outlet to express themselves. Children participating in these workshops can find a sense of community and joy despite the trauma they're enduring. While individual citizens might not be able to tackle immense global conflicts like the refugee crisis, small projects like Love Without Borders art workshops help to alleviate human suffering, to provide connection, to share our stories with one another, and to create more peace and art through friendship.
And welcome back after the break. We're talking to Kayra Martinez from Love Without Borders, and we learned a lot about their housing project. We discussed a lot about how you are trying to support individual families, but we didn't touch upon how you try to do it through art. And this is an extremely interesting project to us. This is how we got to know you. I would like you to tell us a little bit more what you're doing in your gallery. How can art support refugees with their housing needs?
So this project was started by accident, or as we say, serendipity. So back in 2016, I was working in the refugee camp with thousands of people, and everything I do in my life, I always try to say keep it simple. So I thought, on this particular day, I want those children to have something to do where they can enjoy their childhood, just to be happy, to smile. And I took paper and crayons into a tent with 20 kids, and it was the most magical experience I think I've ever had in my life. I have no art background, so it was really exceptional that day, I remember. And there you could have heard a pin drop. Completely still. The children were drawing with great passion. And then I looked at the drawings and I thought, oh my gosh, they're all so traumatized. They were drawing their journey from Turkey to Greece, stick figures upside down in the water. And these children were 5 years old, 7 years old. And I thought, oh my goodness, what am I going to do with this? So I rented an apartment near the camp. I bought the best quality of canvases, the best quality of acrylics, and the best brushes that I could find. And I started bringing 15 kids to my house every day. I organized with the parents ahead of time to bring the best quality of food. And they cooked traditional Syrian food for 2 or 3 hours while the kids were playing, while I was teaching them English and German, and while we were creating art. And at the end of the day, we had the best food in the world. And those children got to paint the stories that they had on their hearts. It was beautiful, authentic, and an organic program that I just happened to run across. So then I put a couple of the paintings on Facebook and I said, this is what we're doing in the refugee camp. And everybody went crazy. They all wanted to buy the art. And at that time, they were getting food, unfortunately, that was rotten. The kids that we were taking out of the camp, where we sent them to the doctors and they were malnutrition when we took them out of the camp. And so I said, yes, we're selling them. I started out with 20 euros, but afterwards I moved the children's paintings to 30 euros. It's a great amount to buy healthy food. Each family got the same amount. Each child, no matter what they were drawing, got the same amount. And I told the children what beautiful little artists they were. You're the best artists in the world.
How did you get money for that? Like, did you find some individuals to sponsor this?
So this was all my money. I spent the first 4 years. I flew back to Frankfurt. I'm a flight attendant as well. And I worked as many hours as I could possibly fit in. But always I was in Greece for 2 weeks a month. And I used all of my funds for the first 4 years to buy everything, even the first collection of art that we were able to exhibit in Boston. I made a post on Facebook and I asked if any of my friends had a space where we could show the art. And a friend of mine is a lawyer, and he offered me his penthouse.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were very fortunate because NBC actually reported about the first event. And we'll send you a link so you can take a look at that. But that's how it started. And basically, everybody after that started asking me to go speak to their school, to their temple, to their church and university. And I said yes to everyone. I had no speaking background either, but I took every single one that was offered. I flew to 153 different cities around the world. I would say kudos to San Francisco. 40 of those were in San Francisco. And I spoke to thousands of people about the refugee crisis. But I wanted to change the narrative. So you're not hearing about the sadness and the despair, although I made that aware as well. But I wanted the people to understand who made this beautiful piece of art. This man was a lawyer before in Syria. This woman was a teacher before in her home country in Congo. And I wanted to change the narrative, bring positive stories about the people and give them a voice. We connected the artist and the person that purchased their painting because we took photos of every painting that we sold, and we showed those paintings to the people that made the art. And you can't imagine the confidence, the motivation, and the empowerment that was created through that program.
Also, it's obvious how healing is this process to kids. And I experienced many times and there was like one time in Iliona's camp. We had it with Alex. We had a school, so the kids they go in the morning to the public school, and then they come to us at 2 to help them with their homework because they were behind. They are not Greeks, and they were going to study Greek. And there was in Iliona's camp they made this football pitch to people to play, and they were happy. Remember the football, and then I don't know what happened. They brought this maybe 100 family from a camp, and they put them there, and they put them in tents, and they lived there in this pitch. And then people start attacking them. The refugees inside. They said this pitch is for us to play football. Then you brought this people, so they were fighting. And I remember that year it snowed, so we didn't know it was that's gonna snow. I was home, and then in the morning I got a message in our WhatsApp group in the at work, and they said it snowed, and it snowed on top of the tents, and then it collapsed on top of them. And they saw, and then we opened our school at 2, and I found 2 kids. They were standing outside, and I told them the classes start at 4 for you. And he said, we don't know where to sit. They were waiting for us to open so they can go and sit because they were so cold. And then when I asked them, how did you spend the night? We spent the night standing. So these kids, they were like, and one of them was crying because he didn't do his homework. And he said, I didn't know, uh, I didn't have the time, the courage. Like he was so scared because you're standing and you're waiting. So it's very traumatizing for these kids. And thank you for the work that you are doing. Yeah.
When we were in your gallery, you showed us pictures of people who created it in your space, and you pointed at several people who started supporting themselves with art. Was this your idea from the start that art will provide housing, basically?
In the beginning, it was just for food. But as it started to grow and all of the people within the camp heard about my project, they started to write to me and they would say, I heard about your project and I know it's just for children, but I'm an adult and I was wondering if you would like to take a look at my artwork. And I said yes to everybody. I was busy. I worked 18 hours a day in the camp. I bought every piece of art that was shown to me. Some of it was on paper plates. Some of it was on wood. Every piece of art to me was golden. And this is basically how it started. And then when the project started to grow and I started to get all of these invites for pop-up events, we had to change it a little bit because we had to accept 30 by 40 canvases, 40 by 60 maximum, because I carry all of the art in suitcases. So I can take 2 suitcases to each event. And that's how we've done it since 2000, probably 18.
That's beautiful. Um, Not to throw the Greek government under the bus, but in this housing crisis here, where is the government? Food and housing, this is something that should be on the side of the government. Yes, everywhere governments use the support of NGOs, but usually for additional things. That should be only a support. It should not be, NGOs should not be the main providers of housing or food. Yet, in so many places here, this is how it's happening. What is your take on the government, their engagement? And I'm referring specifically to Helios program.
So I actually wrote them because on Facebook it looked like the program was up and running, and I want accountability. I have been supporting hundreds of refugees for many years, and I really want accountability for them. I did write to Helios, and I said I have a woman with a husband and two children that are now on the street because your program evicted. I mean, you didn't have clear communication with the Greek landlords. So this has broken a big connection with the landlords, this Helios project. And we barely have landlords that will rent to us. So it made it even worse. And the people were evicted, their rents weren't paid, and they closed their doors on their classes. So we are housing several of those families and people from the Helios. And absolutely, there's no call for that because the funding was there. And I, as I mentioned, trying to get accountability is impossible.
But how the EU is giving money to Greece to solve this issue? The Greeks, the Greek government doesn't do anything. Why there is no accountability? Why can the EU do anything to make sure that this money is going to this project?
This is exactly what I'm trying to do, is to get accountability from the EU. We see already, I sent some links from The Guardian that were written back in 2017 or 2019 about the catastrophe, the monies that were not being used for the refugee crisis. So we already know where the Greek government is on this page. But the EU needs to have some answers. And I'm not quite sure how I'm going to get those answers. I haven't given up. I've tried sending emails. I wish that I had more people working with me on behalf of the refugees. We have so many cases of unjust landlords or people that are suffering from the situation here in Greece. And I have to take one at a time, but I'm doing my best to try to find out why they're handling the situation. Because with the money in the millions of euros, there should be a home for every person.
Yeah.
Those articles that you're mentioning, the ones in The Guardian, they mention that when it comes to the funds the European Union gave Greece to help managing the refugee crisis, as much as $70 of every $100 has been wasted. When I saw this number, 70% of the funds are being wasted. So they do not write specifically how they got into this number. So I have to give this this information. But how on earth are we even considering those numbers? I mean, we talk about them because we know that some of this money for sure is wasted. I'm not sure about how much. But seriously, it's billions, like thousands of billions of euros at this moment.
I don't know if I told you, I met a guy from France. He worked with the UNHCR of France, and he was visiting here the camps. And then he was talking to me about the financial aid. And I have worked in the cash program before in
Mm-hmm.
Samos. And then he told me how much they are getting. I always said, I think it was 100, but I remember 2016 when it started the first time, they were giving 80 to 70 euro. And then he told me that the papers that we are reading in France, that refugees in Greece are getting 300 euro
Mm-hmm.
each.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him, okay, if you're lucky, you will get 80 or 90.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just when we were in the Samos camp, those 40% only people got it.
Mm-hmm.
But on
Yeah.
paper, it's 300. So
Yeah.
people are like, wow, they're giving them 300.
You know what? It's something very similar happened to me when I first came to Lesbos. I was sitting in a cafe, like an older gentleman sat next to me. So I was like working on some report. He was asking what I was doing. I told him what I'm doing in the camp, and he said like, this is a huge problem with refugees because it is not fair that for doing nothing you're getting so much money. So I asked him, how much do you think they're getting? He said like, well, everybody knows that they're getting 500 euros a month per person. And I was like, where did you
What?
get this number
I
from?
wish.
And this was the time when, this was the good time, when everybody would get 95 euros per month, right? And he was very specific. It was 545 or something
Wow.
like this. I was like, this is a very specific number. And I started digging. And I don't know if this was how he got into the number, but this was an allowance for a family with 5 children for a month,
Okay.
right? So what he
Hmm.
thought was for one person, let's say 500 something euros, was for a family of 7
So he thought the
grown-ups.
family of
And
7 are getting 3,000.
yeah,
Or this.
right? There was like a limit. It wasn't like 95 per
Yeah.
person, and no matter how many
Yeah.
children you have, there was a cap at some
Yeah.
point. And like, people really, really do not understand that. And, there is still an economic crisis happening in Greece. So, of course, when they hear this kind of, not even propaganda, it's false news, right? That refugees are getting 500 sitting in the camps. If somebody is getting 500 euros a month, they will not stay in the camp.
Yeah.
They will rent something out. They will go somewhere else, like, to get a proper place to live, not stay in poor camps.
So it's very impressive how just one person like you can do a lot of impact and help a lot of people, while a government pretend that they cannot do anything and they bitch about it. That's it's an issue, they cannot solve it. So how can people who really want to help refugees replicate your model in other countries?
So I think it's really important, since I've spoken at so many schools and children 5 years old all the way to university students, I always leave them with a message. I'm a flight attendant, not that I'm a director of an NGO.
Yeah.
That just came about. It's really, really important that every person is doing something, whether it's in Greece, whether it's in their own community. Small, small kindnesses go a long way, and everybody can do something.
Everybody can do something, and it doesn't mean that everybody have to support refugees, right? You can find your own cause.
Absolutely.
I'm wondering, how many people do you think you supported since you started your program?
Thousands.
Thousands. As an individual, basically, you and Ahmed, basically being two, plus now you have some extra people in your gallery, right, to support.
Yes. Yeah. Our team is based solely on refugee background. Anybody that works for us is paid, and we don't accept volunteers from the refugee community.
Mm-hmm. So does it come from this notion that usually NGOs are taking volunteers from refugee community as a free labor, and it's unfair?
That's what we've seen.
Yeah.
And I think a very important message also to the organizations that are having women sew or create things for their organization and they're selling them. You can't be supporting refugees if you're doing work like this. It's not fair. It's not fair to anybody in our community to do that. And I've seen that, unfortunately, quite a lot.
If the whole revenue goes to the NGO, not to the person, because this is something important we actually didn't say, that whichever piece of art you sell, 100% of the revenue goes to the person who created the art, right?
That's correct. I have a full-time job, and we only have a few people on our payroll. So we are very focused that all of the funding, whatever's coming our way, it's to give back to those refugees that are in the situation. We sit with them day to day. We see the lives and the conditions that they live in. And it's really important for us that we're 100% focused on getting all of that money back to them.
Do you think many of the people who took part in your classes and in your activities got almost completely independent?
Oh, for sure. So, as far as how we want to be simply a bridge, that we're offering art tools to the refugee community. So we don't want to influence their art. We simply want to give them the tools and let them be the creator of the art and the idea behind it. And so it's really beautiful to see how adults, they usually want to take it home or take it back to the refugee camp and spend a little bit of time creating. And there was a young man from Cameroon, and we gave him the tools, and because he had a medical issue, he had nothing to do every day. He was immobile, and he started to paint. And it didn't even take him 3 months before his paintings were extraordinary. And when I started to take them to the pop-up events, they were selling for the exact amount that rent would be, which gave me an idea. And I told him we had an angel donor to pay for his medical operation because he was waiting 1 year for that operation. And we told him that as soon as he got out of the hospital, we would then move him to his own apartment. And he started to pay with the sales of his art for his own apartment. And now he has his own job. He's independent of Love Without Borders, and that's exactly what we like to see. We have many cases, and I love to say that also there's a lot of focus, of course, with women and children. Most of the people that reach out to me say, can we house a woman and child or a family? But I don't remember one time where anybody just said, can I help a man, a single man? And so our project has highlighted this. We had a project called The Lost Men and The Lost Boys, and we were taking photos or art, anything they had time. Back in 2018, it was so busy. We had so many events, and we had a lot of people that were on the street. And so at one point, we were actually taking 2 photos off of their photo roll, the camera, and we were getting developed and selling their photos at our events. And it was enough to give them food and a little bit of dignity. And yes, so we were able to really focus on helping individual single men. And just like you saw our event the other night, it was all about men's art. So it's good to highlight these things that people don't hear so much about.
I very much agree. This is what we saw almost everywhere where we went, that especially young men are very much not visible in this crisis because everybody thinks that you're a young, strong man. You're gonna be okay somehow, right? Because we expect this from men, to be strong, both physically and mentally, to support women, which is also not fair to women, presenting them as the weaker gender always. But everywhere we went, whenever there were any type of classes, services, was always focused on women and children. And again, nothing wrong about this. Everybody needs support, but excluding male, especially single men, this is a huge issue. Because also, I hate this argument that people are bringing, that like those young Muslim men going to Europe, to steal our jobs, women, and so on. Like, those are the people we should really support because they will go into the job market, they will earn money, they will pay taxes, they will be like core of the workforce in every country, right? So giving them skills, opportunities right now when they are still in the asylum process, when they are still in camps or still have an unstable situation, this benefits later.
Absolutely. In 2016, when I was in Nea Kavala, it was actually when I started this project, it was actually all of those single men that were helping me. They were translating, they were taking the families at 5 o'clock in the morning when we went to take them out of the camp, helping me move all their belongings, driving to Saloniki, everything that I couldn't do. I mean, I was doing so much, and those men were so key into this project that I created, and they were actually, I think, getting paid €1 from the Red Cross to work all day in the camp. And so I ended up getting them an apartment in Nea Kavala. There were 7 of them, and I paid for their apartment.
Okay. We spoke about so many things. Are you out of questions?
One last.
This is very rare that you're out of questions. Okay.
Future plans for Love Without Borders. What is your vision or the vision of the organization?
So now we have 3 refugees working alongside myself in the gallery, and I'm actually opening up the table to them. What do you want to see? I've asked many of the artists as well. What do you want next? How can we evolve as a group? Because this is no longer about my project, nor did I ever want that. This is about our community. It's global now. It's in integrating the local community, students from across the world, and also our small team. So how is it that we can work together? So when students come to volunteer, I have a program, but I keep the spreadsheet open and I say, feel free to write in any project that you want, because this isn't about us. This is about how can we create a community? How can we create something for everybody to share where everybody can take part and support each other?